Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. Thank you again for tuning in. I cannot believe that we are mid-August. I feel like 2020 is, almost done. And hopefully you guys have done something really great this year. And, whether or not it's been good for you, you've made it positive because no matter what happens, you can always come out strong in the end. And before we get started, just wanted to thank PISA for being a sponsor to this podcast. We couldn't do it without you. So we just wanted to thank you guys. And if you haven't heard about PISA, just go visit their website, pisa.org. And they have 3 upcoming events in August. So if you want to go check it out, go to their events tab and make sure you sign up because there are limited spots. And the topics that they will be covering on this webinar is Global Supply Chain Outlook and Government Affairs Town Hall. So yeah.
We are so excited to bring Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes, who serves as the president of Black Mountain Metals, on the podcast today. You want to talk about somebody who is definitely taking these times and making it the best. I mean, most of her work is in Australia. She can't even travel there, and she's still running it from Fort Worth, which is pretty amazing. So prior to joining Black Mountain in 2017, Ashley worked in several lead project engineering roles at ExxonMobil, XTO Energy, managing drilling, completions, and planning aspects of international shale explorations in countries around the world, laying the groundwork for $1 billion U.S. capital deployment. Let me mention she's under 30 too. Pretty amazing. Ashley has an entrepreneurial background, having developed business models and secured funding for companies in biotech, oil and gas, and educational software. She is recently highlighted and featured as an honoree on the 2020 Forbes 30 Under 30 Energy list. Ashley, we are so excited to have you on today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this.
All right, ladies. Well, let's dive right in. So, Ashley, tell us a little bit about your upbringing. What was life like growing up in a small town in Oklahoma?
Look, it really was a bit of an idyllic childhood. Looking back, I was able to have those wide open spaces running around. I very much grew up in a rural area with a lot of property. But what I would say is, from an early age, it was really drilled into me that nothing comes without very hard work. And I come from a very long line of hard workers. So there's like this urban legend in my family that my great grandma, who lived to be 100, rebuilt her own front porch at 85. So I just know I've got these genes, man. But no, it really was fantastic and really instilled in me that if I want something, I've got to put in a ton of work to go get it.
I love that. It's so funny to hear about your urban legend. I think every family has something like that.
Absolutely.
So you were one of the first in your family to attend university. And we know Oklahoma is a big oil state. And you ended up going to OU. And was that originally planned to be an engineer? Like, how did you end up going there and being an engineer, getting to oil and gas? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I was the first person in my immediate family to go to university. So I really had no idea what I was doing. I knew I liked math and science, and I also knew I wanted to leave Choctaw. That's my hometown. And so, looking around, really what I saw as opportunities, because Oklahoma has so much oil and gas, was the oil and gas business. I knew it was global and it seemed like people got to travel, and I thought that was exciting. So when I went to OU, I knew I wanted to be an engineer, but discipline I was a bit undecided about. And so did kind of an introduction to engineering class where they did a review of every discipline. And I really landed on petroleum engineering because of that global nature, but also because of the personalities in the oil and gas business. I think, specifically energy broadly is just one of those fields that human ingenuity at its finest. And truly it's been built by entrepreneurs, and just, no challenge too big, get out there and move the ball down the field. And I love that. So ended up making a good decision, although honestly, it was a bit of a crapshoot trying to pick, what am I going to do here?
For the rest of your life,
For the rest of my life, no pressure. 18, that whole model to me is a bit bizarre. You're choosing what you're supposed to want to do forever at 18 years old, but that's a different conversation.
So we know you ended up at Exxon and then kind of transitioned into XTO, and you were there for about 3 to 4 years, I believe.
Yep.
What was that like? Well, knowing now how successful you are and how, high up you went, would you say that during those 3 to 4 years, you had those entrepreneurial skills and kind of maybe opening up in conversations and meetings and kind of showcasing like, hey, you're underestimating this young, blonde, pretty girl, Was that hard, do you think, during those 3-4 years when you were just entering into this world and maybe they underestimated your potential? Because looking now, they're like, oh my gosh, she was on our team. Do you think people didn't see that? Because I know it's hard at coming in at a young age. People think like, what do they know?
Yeah, look, I think inevitably coming right out of university, you're going to have a degree of that. So when I joined ExxonMobil, I joined on an exploration team. So I was a drilling and completions engineer for international shale exploration. And so what that meant was, although I was at a huge company, I got to wear a lot more hats and really have more responsibility than I generally would have at that stage in my career in more of a development type role, because our exploration team was small. We were the first team in the country. You get in there and you just kind of figure it out. And so because of that, I really did have amazing mentors at Exxon, which I've continued to keep in touch with and really have just made a tremendous impact on my career. So I wouldn't say that, I didn't really feel underestimated. What I would say is my skill set was, it was my first time working in kind of a professional capacity, and I genuinely wanted to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that the Exxon environment responded well to. And really, they were able to take this very, excited and hardworking young woman and really instill these sharp technical skills in me and give me a bit of a structure around project management and remote supply chains. And then I took that and brought it into kind of that entrepreneurial sphere. But no, Exxon really was great to me, and especially my mentors. They were fantastic.
So you mentioned that you went into exploration where most of the people start in maybe the field level and then they've got to learn from there and then they go into completions group. How did you get into such a unique role going right into Exxon?
So the summer before, I had interned specifically in that group. So at the time, and I can't comment about how Exxon is organized now because I don't know, I've been out for a while, but at the time, the drilling company sat completely off by itself. So ExxonMobil is not asset teams, it's more functionally divided. So I sat in the drilling function and my entire team was just drilling and completions engineers. And so I had interned the prior summer on this international shale team. And unfortunately, the year I was graduating, Exxon only hired 2 drilling engineers full time. And so I got one of those 2 spots because the team that I had been on, I just connected with so well and had identified those champions and those mentors. And for young people in your career, there is nothing better you can do than to go out there and identify those people who are going to put their hand up for you and vouch for your abilities. So for me, that's really what did it. I was fortunate enough to just get randomly assigned to the team during my internship, but then I proved myself that summer and formed those relationships and got the full-time offer.
Okay, gotcha. And, it's pretty interesting because you had that opportunity, you're one of the few to do that. And then you actually ended up quitting the job to go, which is like, you would think that you probably thought, I'm in this role, I'm probably going to move up within
making money, feeling so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, no, wait, I'm going to quit and go to Harvard and go spend 2 years there. And
spend money, a lot of money.
And spend money, and put myself maybe into debt. So what was going on?
Yes. Yeah. So look, I think it's a hard decision for anyone. for me, I knew that I didn't want to be at a big organization. I knew that from the day I started at Exxon. I knew that was not going to be my forever company or my forever role, that I wanted to go to a big organization to develop my technical skills early on, so that when I did make a transition later on, I could say, but you know what, like I was trained with the best of them. Like I can really vouch for my technical abilities, and I know what I'm talking about. And I also felt like it was helpful from a brand perspective to say, like, I was an ExxonMobil engineer. And so once I kind of got 3 years in, and that's the end of ExxonMobil's early career milestone. And so effectively, that's when they brand you like a competent engineer. Like you're kind of able to go do stuff without like a lot of oversight. I quit on my 3-year anniversary on the dot. I was like, I'm competent. I'll see y'all. No, so like I did love my time there, but I've always wanted to be entrepreneurial. And so inevitably it just wasn't a great fit for me culturally. And so I was really doing a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out how to make that transition, and really like, you know, how to convince investors to take a bet on this, you know, random Oklahoma girl who had just gone and worked at Exxon for a while. And I decided that going and getting an MBA would be a really good pivot point for me. So I ended up applying to schools, got accepted to Harvard, and immediately was like, from a brand perspective, I have to do this. Like, I have to do this. Because again, it's something that I can point to and say, that's when I made the transition from engineer more to an entrepreneurial type role. It's not a required step. So I get a lot of questions from young engineers, or really just anyone, saying like, when do I go get an MBA? Like thinking it is like a part of their required pathway. And I always tell people, like, it is not required. In fact, you don't gain, you know, a ton of hard skills during the process. For me, it was incredibly worthwhile, because I was able to round out my skill set, having been so technical and operational previously, and really kind of round out those soft skills and get a better view of what's happening in the world outside of just the oil and gas business, which had been my focus to date. And then also gain access to the Harvard network, which was fantastic, has helped me tremendously in my ventures since business school. So for me, it ended up being the right decision. And just, you know, my framework for deciding that is, you know, if you can't bet on yourself, like, what are you going to bet on? So when I was leaving Exxon, of course, I had cash inflow. I was making money, and I quit, and I went and spent a lot of money going to business school, but it's ended up paying dividends. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's such an amazing story, because I know when we first spoke with you, Jamie and I were like, wait, do we need to go to Harvard? When do I start applying? Like, do we need to do our MBA? You know? So I really like that you answered that question, because I'm sure a lot of people, even, you know, following your story or listening to this podcast, are probably thinking, okay, this is what she did, so I need to do that. And just like diets or, you know, other stuff, not everything fits everybody. You know, like everybody has their own path, and just because it works for one person doesn't mean that it's going to work for someone else. But I think the one thing that you said that's really cool is, like, if you from a young age are working and you look around and you say, okay, I don't fit in a bigger organization, I'm very entrepreneurial. And that's something that you should have in the, like, if you're an entrepreneur, that's like a question that you've been asking yourself since probably 18, right? So I think if you do identify through those things, then I think, yeah, you're right. Harvard is probably, or, you know, an MBA is definitely worthwhile, because you are betting on yourself. And if you're an entrepreneur, you know that if you bet on yourself enough, it's going to be successful. But like you're right. I don't think it's the right way for just everybody, because a lot of people will go get an MBA just for the title without having any entrepreneurial skills, and then they're just in debt for nothing, you know?
Yeah, I think you have to know what you want to do with it. And I think it's great for making a transition or a pivot, but I don't think it's required for folks.
Yeah,
Excellent.
that's really good advice, because I know, like you said, Macy, we were talking about it right after we talked to you.
Oh yeah,
So,
I'm like, okay, I need to go get an MBA. Like we need to do all of this stuff. But
Oh, man.
well, no, thank you for answering that question. And looking at your story, your background, you are married to, your high school sweetheart. You are a boss, like you've obviously driven your career so strongly, and you're a leader. You're in a very high-end role now. You've went through school, you went through engineering, and you're still with your, high school sweetheart. Tell us a little bit about that work-life balance and how that looks, because I know it could be very difficult on a couple, especially when, he is a lawyer, so he also has a career. How do you guys balance two high-end careers?
Yeah. So, few points there. First of all, I'd say, my husband is incredibly supportive. And, we very much kind of see the world the same way, are aligned on what our end goal is, and can also appreciate that this working incredibly hard phase isn't going to last forever. We kind of both subscribe to the seasons theory, which I think is a Melinda Gates thing, but I keep quoting that it's Melinda Gates, and I actually don't know, so I should probably look into that. But so it's around, there are different seasons of your life to really focus on maximizing XYZ variable. Because if you try to maximize everything at once, I genuinely believe you're going to drive yourself crazy. And so, from a work-life balance perspective, I am no role model. Like, I'm definitely not. Prior to COVID, I was spending about 50 to 75% of my time in Perth, Australia. And my husband and I live in Fort Worth, Texas. So Perth is plus 13 hours from here. It's literally the complete opposite. And we didn't get to spend a tremendous amount of time together. But what we did was, the time that we did get to spend together, we really made it count. So we had, like special events, and we would go on kind of special weekends away, or have date night, and really just make sure we were like focusing on our quality time, because we didn't get that quantity of time. So you had to make sure it really counted and was really special and memorable. And we would always make sure we would talk every morning and every night. So again, you're on the opposite side of the world. So this like texting throughout the day thing is not like, you just can't, because either he's asleep or I'm asleep. Yeah, but we would always talk on the phone. And I know it's such a bizarre life for people to think about, but again, we subscribe to that seasons theory. And I'm not going to be living in Perth half of the year forever, but I am right now. I will also say, yesterday, I was talking to the incoming women for petroleum engineering at OU, and someone asked me a question, what would be the advice that I would give them if their partner wasn't supportive of them being ambitious? And I just stared directly at them and said, then that's not the right partner. Like, it's not. Like, that's not it.
It is not.
No, agree.
Yeah,
Boy, bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Yeah, that's exactly right. I know. So that was effectively what I said. I should have said it like that.
Totally.
No, I agree with the seasons, because technically, I mean, you can't live your life like that forever. Nobody can. You eventually get to a point where you're like completely run down and you lose all motivation.
Yep.
But what I also really liked is what you mentioned about like taking that quality time, since there wasn't a ton of quantity of it, the quality. And I have to say, when I was in Australia in February for about 2 weeks, I have to admit it was very difficult to communicate to my husband or like my family, because we would be talking on totally different times and totally getting confused on what time it was in Australia versus what time it was in the US. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it's So you talked about earlier in the episode about working through the Harvard network to get an interview with an independent company, which is now the company you work for, Black Mountain. After meeting the CEO, you were hired on as the director of business development, and then you went on to be the founder of the Black Mountain Metals. You were just in your mid-20s. This is a huge accomplishment that people dream of, right? So can you walk us through the steps you took to to get to a company like that, and then also to do that at such a young age, it's really inspiring.
Thank you. No, it's really nice. So you're right. I just networked my butt off to try to find a spot at like an entrepreneurial resources company. And so I targeted the Harvard Alumni Network and reached out to all of kind of the resource private equity funds. And several of them were kind enough to send my resume to their portfolio companies that they thought were exciting. And so Natural Gas Partners was one of those very kind funds that sent through my resume to a guy named Rhett Bennett, who's CEO of Black Mountain. And he's so cool. So at the time, he was like 36 or something and had started Black Mountain in 2007, had already started 5 or 6 companies. And I was just like, I want to be this man, when I'm 36. So I definitely want to come work for Rhett. And so joined Black Mountain in his oil and gas company. So Black Mountain Oil and Gas, not super creative naming over here, but as director of business development. But yeah, about 4 months in, ended up co-founding Black Mountain Metals. And so now I'm president and COO of the organization. So co-founded Black Mountain Metals, went to Perth, set up our Perth office, raised $75 million there, did some acquisitions, went through a hostile takeover. Late last year, I co-founded my second Black Mountain venture, so Black Mountain Exploration, where we acquired 1.7 million acres of tight gas acreage in northern Western Australia. So it's been a wild ride. I think it was such a great move after business school. And Rhett has just been a fantastic mentor and now business partner.
Wow. So I know when we spoke last time, you mentioned that on your 28th birthday, you purchased Poseidon Nickel. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. Can you talk a little bit about what happened there? And I know you went full public with that offer.
Yeah. So, it was a hilarious thing to happen on a 28th birthday. And for whatever reason, on my 29th birthday, we bought something too. I'm like, am I just psychologically like baking these things in? But so 28th birthday, 30th, didn't buy anything. I was like hid out, but I'm 30 as of like last week. So 28th birthday, we filed a hostile takeover for Poseidon Nickel. So it's a publicly listed nickel mining company in Australia. And it was an adventure. So, really what ends up happening in a hostile takeover is initially you try to do a friendly takeover, right? Because nobody wants to be like the hostile person. But so we sent through an offer to the board and they rejected it. And so did not put the offer to shareholders. And so what your next step is, if you want to continue proceeding, is you can do a hostile takeover. And so effectively put it to a shareholder vote without the support of the board. So you have to kind of start getting involved in the press and crafting the narrative around why the offer is compelling. And for me, like I was 100% convinced and I'm still convinced that the offer was compelling. So that was just a very interesting way to celebrate 28. 29 is the day we signed the final documents on buying the acreage in Western Australia.
Wow. That's like so exciting, really amazing. I want to touch on one thing though, is you didn't really have any mining experience before. So it's still like this process still like blows my mind that you went and started a mining company with no prior experience. Yeah. How can someone do that when they didn't really know anybody yet? Can you talk about who you met and how that proceeded into you actually getting over to Australia and doing that?
Absolutely. So it kind of goes back to networking and asking questions. And if you're genuine about asking questions, people will mentor you and kind of get you up that learning curve. So Black Mountain Metals started just by us getting excited about electrification and really how we as a natural resources company could play a role in electrification. Long story short, did a tremendous amount of battery research and specifically lithium-ion battery cathode research, and came to the conclusion that nickel, and specifically nickel sulfide, would be incredibly important to electrification going forward. So effectively, nickel is kind of the oil and gas of the battery business. And so there's actually more nickel in a lithium ion battery than lithium. So fun fact. So did a worldwide scan of nickel opportunities, and there were kind of 3 core producing basins. One is in Russia. We're Americans, so probably not capable of going there. Canada, it's controlled, that specific basin is controlled by a few major companies, so we can't get in. And then there was the Kimbalda Basin in Western Australia. And so it's the 3rd largest nickel sulfide producing region in the world, and there were actionable opportunities. So we got there. On the mining side, there was actually one guy I met who's still our senior advisor today. His name's Mick McMullen, and he just changed the game for me. So I was at dinner in New York with this Carlisle guy talking about mining, and he was like, all right, I have somebody to introduce you to. He's going to be at this dinner, so you need to come. So I came to the dinner, and Mick McMullen was there. And so he had just sold this platinum and palladium company called Stillwater Mining in Montana for just a huge multiple. I think it was it set some record, like the highest deal in mining and metals history or something. And so we just hit it off. Like, I kind of told him the vision about, Kimbalda at the time and nickel, and, getting excited about copper too, and explained our background and what we were looking to do. And he signed on to be our senior advisor. So he has put together several mining companies over the years and had just tremendous success on exits. So he's Australian, by the way, but so he had this team that he would always pull back together. It was like he was getting the band back together again. And so he introduced me to his band that he would always get back together. And that was the team that I recruited to start Black Mountain Metals. So basically, like, my entire suite of VPs came from Mick. Mick continued to be my senior advisor, still is today. He went on to be CEO of Detour Gold, which he sold. Again, it was like less than a year. Like, the man is insane. But yeah, no, so full props to just getting out there, meeting people, and then communicating a compelling vision, and getting them on board.
Wow. It takes a village,
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to know everything. You just have to ask the right questions.
Yeah. And so Black Widow is the nickname that a lot of magazines and news media have given you in Australia, because you guys are about to start fracking for the first time in 5 years, and you are kind of known as the public face of fracking now. And if Australia is anything close to how Canada is, which I believe they are, most people just are so negative towards it. So how do you deal with all that backlash in Australia and people thinking that you are like this horrible person for wanting to frack?
I know, yeah, it's actually a bit sad, because I'm like, hey, I came to Australia to mine battery metals. Like, look, guys, I'm part of the solution. And I first off, I am very, very bullish natural gas. Like, I very much view it as a transition fuel. It's a fantastic way to reduce emissions from coal power, incredibly reliable, and Australia has a ton of natural gas. So win. I mean, like, check. The Canning Basin is the 8th largest undeveloped tight gas, it's the 8th largest tight gas reservoir in the world. And it's undeveloped. It's like effectively completely undeveloped. And so for us, it is this enormous opportunity that, if it works, it's going to add so much value to Australia, so much value to the traditional owners of the land. So it's a very remote area, no other resources, and not a lot of jobs. And so the traditional owners of the land genuinely want this project to go forward, to make their lives and the lives of their children better. Like, they want the jobs, they want the investment. Like, it's fantastic. And I think everyone has a right to that. And so for me, that's the opinion that matters to me. It doesn't really faze me if someone who's never been to the area, probably will never go to the area, is against the project.
Or has no idea what fracking is.
Mm-hmm.
They just think, oh, frack is bad. You're polluting our environment. You
It's
cause
so
earthquakes.
frustrating.
It's so frustrating. And there are a lot of mistruths out there about fracking. And so you're exactly right. Like the things that people tell me that we're going to be doing in the Canning Basin through fracking, I'm like, what do you mean? So we have been working through putting out some public education on what fracking is, and really just trying to make sure that mistruths aren't the only voice in the room. And so I don't know if y'all know George Whitman, but he's our VP of drilling and completions here. He came from EOG. He was one of EOG's kind of main Permian frac guys. He's awesome. So he's helping me put out some just informative videos and informative presentations on what fracking is and why you shouldn't be afraid of it. And we're just working to lower the fear associated with the process and make sure people actually understand what's happening. So for me, how I deal with backlash is I know what I'm doing is right. I identify the opinions that actually matter to me and try to not listen to the rest of the noise. And then I try to put out facts about what's actually happening. We'll see. We'll see if we're able to kind of ease public concerns. That I know in my heart what we're doing is going to be really beneficial for the area and for Australia. So I'm just waiting to be proven right.
I love it.
So it's interesting though, because you would think that there's a lot of other companies that are trying to get this property. How were y'all able to obtain that? Because I'm sure, I mean, with you saying it's one of these largest plays, it seems like that was probably a difficult thing to do.
Yep. So we acquired the acreage that we currently own from Mitsubishi, and they had made kind of a corporate mandate that they were leaving all upstream operated oil and gas assets that they needed to divest. And so it was a great opportunity for us. So the reason we got the opportunity was the Western Australian government had put in place a fracking moratorium for kind of the 2 or 3 years prior to us acquiring the asset. The timeline of events was the fracking moratorium was lifted. Mitsubishi decided as a corporate mandate they needed to exit the asset, and we acquired the asset. So we acquired it right after the moratorium was lifted. Pre-moratorium being put in place, there actually were a tremendous amount of companies in the Canning Basin, including some familiar U.S. names like Apache, Conoco, etc. The moratorium kind of chases people out, right? And so you end up shooting yourself in the foot as a government wanting development and wanting projects in the area. Because if you can't frack, like you can't produce tight gas. And so it's really unfortunate what's happened, but now we do have some momentum. There's still definitely challenges. I would say a lot of my job is stakeholder engagement, which is bizarre because like I'm an engineer and like I don't know. This Oklahoma girl, I don't know if I should be like the person coordinating with government, but I do. It seems to be going fine. I don't know. But yeah, so that's really why we got the opportunity. It was a confluence of events and a good timeline for us, but I don't think it will always just be us pushing forward. I think now that moratorium has been lifted, more folks are going to start coming into the basin.
No, that makes sense. And y'all the first to market at that time. So it makes sense how y'all were able to get it from Mitsubishi. So we're near the end here. So just want to end on the last question. So many people aspire to own their own company, be a CEO, work for themselves. And you've already done it at age now 30. Happy belated birthday. What do you think sets you apart from the rest?
Look, I don't know that much sets me apart from the rest. I'd say I work very hard. You know, I can put my hand on my heart and promise you that I'm not the smartest person in the room, nor do I want to be. I want to hire really smart people. But I can probably assure you that if I'm not the hardest worker, I'm one of them. And so I think that's what it takes. Like, if you want to start your own business, you need to just go do it. You need to like have that conviction in yourself and really, I said it earlier in the podcast, but if you can't bet on yourself, I don't know what you can bet on. And so you need to have that conviction and confidence in your abilities that, you're going to at least go give it a go. And it's okay if you fail. Like you're going to learn so much through the process. And I would absolutely recommend it. I feel like I've grown so much over the last, I guess, 3 years. 3 years I've been at Black Mountain. No, look, I'm certainly a hard worker, and I think that's what it takes. It's not easy being an entrepreneur.
Just like you said, luck looks like a lot of hard work.
It
People just look in and say, oh, it must have been so easy to get here, and it's like, you don't know what my days look like.
Oh my God. I know.
Like, I wouldn't want to wish this work on anybody.
I don't want to do this. Like, you want to do this. I promise you don't. I know there's one quote that I really like. I know we need to sign off, but it's, the harder I work, the luckier I seem to get.
I love that. It's so true, though.
It's
so true. Well, Ashley, thank you so much, first of all, for coming on our podcast and sharing your story. You are the most inspiring 30-year-old that I know and that we've had on this podcast.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I know there's a lot of people listening to this thinking, or at least having like a new fire and a new passion under them. Because every time I talk to you, I get like this fire awaken in me where I'm like, all right, you got some stuff to work on,
Look, we've got a lot of problems to solve. So we need smart, passionate people focused in the energy business. So I'm super glad. And yeah, y'all get out there and knock it out of the park.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we love to stay connected. So, and if you like this episode, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, follow us. And thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.